Well, the year of our pandemic, 2020, affected many things, but I know that there'll be a great outburst of joy at the news that the Macquarie Park Cemetery tours are back on. The historic Lantern Tour series starts again on the 19th of February, and you can wander around Macquarie Park Cemetery and look out for and see if you can track down Billy Hughes' tomb. So that is something I'm sure you're going to want to be on. Tom Sweeney is a cemetery enthusiast and tour guide. Hello, Tom.
G'day, James.
What's in Macquarie Park Cemetery? What's so good about that one?
What's so important? Well, it's funny. Years ago when I worked there, I suddenly thought to myself, what would make anyone else come to a cemetery other than a burial and a cremation? And I suddenly thought, there's lots of really, really interesting people there. And so we dug the list out and started formatting some stories and everything. So we started the Lantern Tours, about 2008. And we've got a raft of really interesting people. Some you know, some you don't know. But they've all got stories to tell. And there's probably about 150,000 stories to tell. But we've picked out a few of the best ones.
I'm seeing you with a lantern on a stick, kind of 19th century style. I'm hoping that's the case.
Well, basically, when I started the tours, being a bit of a theatrical person, I thought I would do it as a Dickensian funeral director, like in Oliver, like Mr. Sowerberry. So my original costume was very Mr. Sowerberry, and we had hurricane lanterns, but then they thought, that's a bit dangerous, we better go to torches. Yeah. So when I retired, I dropped the costume, and now we do it, in just casual gear.
Right. And so I mentioned Billy Hughes is in the Macquarie Park Cemetery. William Morris, yes. Billy Hughes, former one-time Australian Prime Minister. Who else is there?
Well, we've got Lottie Cox. Now, you might say, well, who's Lottie Lyle? But if you go back to the silent film era, you might think, there's Lillian Gish and that's sort of the Hollywood ones. But in Australia, we actually had our own stars, our own silent screen stars. And Lottie Lyle's story is linked with her partner, a guy called Raymond Longford. They were basically the beginnings of the Australian film industry in the early 1900s, leading up to the 20s. And she has a fabulous story to tell, and it's a love story between the two of them as well. So, she was a great star and well paid. She made about 19 movies. Unfortunately, she got tuberculosis, and she died at 35, long before she could really make a major career out of it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I like, my local interesting cemeteries, Waverley Cemetery, and one of the things I like, as much as I like a famous person, I love a really interesting inscription. I love an elaborate statue. I love a family mausoleum. Are these features of Macquarie Park Cemetery?
Oh, absolutely. Macquarie Park's been basically an active cemetery since 1920. And yes, there are the beautiful old-fashioned monuments, from the very early days of the cemetery. And there's literally hundreds of the Italian family mausoleums and crypts. And then you get the more modern lawn plaques and that sort of thing. But no, there's some beautiful statues, including a lovely obelisk in memory of St. Mary MacKillop's mum, who's buried there. So, there's some lovely, and it's a beautiful undulating cemetery, beautiful treescape, wide roads, easy paths. So it's a lovely place to venture around, regardless of why you're there.
And then there's also that sort of, you can get a sense of an era and a time, can't you? The kind of language that's being used, the style and fashion of the memorials.
Oh, absolutely. On some of the headstones, there's almost little stories of died of an overdose of a toxic ailment. There's some really fascinating little scriptures on some of the more elaborate ones where they go into detail of what happened to them and everything. Beloved brother, sister, uncle of. And so there are stories within the actual monument itself.
And there's also then often that great tragedy where you start looking and going, I think this person lost 3 children under 12, or look how short that life is. Is that a baby, or mother of 3 and she's dead at 27. You can see that kind of those historical truths come through as well.
Oh, yes. There's certainly, could be those there as well. We haven't got them on our particular tours, and we've got them all segmented to different themes. But basically, our first tour will be well-known Australians that have made a name for themselves. And as I said, Lottie Lyle, you may not know. We're also going to look at Sir John Kerr, and we're also going to look at a footballer called Dennis Lutz. He was the first rugby league, rugby union captain of an Australian team
Right.
that toured New Zealand and won. So there's some people there that
Yep.
you may not know right away, but the penny will drop.
Yeah, Tom, fantastic. And if people want to find out about it, where do they go?
Basically, just give Macquarie Park a ring. There's a website there's a link on their website for booking, and it's a whole $5, including supper. Starts about 5:30 in twilight time, and you'll get me as the storyteller, and we'll have a good time together.
Terrific. Tom Sweeney will be your tour guide. Just look up the Macquarie Park Cemetery website. You'll see all the details there.